Hey guys, welcome to 5317. We have a lot to cover in this course. If you're unfamiliar with online learning, make sure that you are paying very careful attention to everything that we have offered. We, meaning the Course-alike team, this course is run using that model, which means there are a variety of professors all delivering information across different sections, but trying to have cohesive assignments, cohesive assessments, all of those things, so that no matter what session you're getting essentially the same experience when it comes to the work you're expected to do and how you're expected to show your mastery of the terms through quizzes and tests and the like. Okay guys, so our purpose as learners in this course in general is to focus on content area literacy and disciplinary literacy. So we're going to have to dive deeply into what literacy even means for us in the 21st century and how you as teachers can support your students as they learn to communicate through language no matter what subject you teach. This course is trying to wear an awful lot of hats. It teaches a variety of populations, everything from folks who are in the elementary context to those who are teaching electives in the high school context. However, no matter your context, the role of this course is to focus on the 6-12 situation, so grade 6 through grade 12. If you do not teach in that context, I need you to pretend that you do. Or if you are not currently a teacher, and your focus is on those earlier grades, I need you to let that go for right now. This is one of the only courses you're going to take where you're looking at this older population. And in order to have met the requirements for one of the possible certifications you can earn after taking this set of courses that you've signed up for, you have to focus on grades 6 through 12. Through all of your assignments. If I'm asking for in your classroom, in your grade level, if that grade level is not in the 6 through 12, pick a grade level, pick a subject, and just stick with it. For everyone else, hopefully that won't hurt you or help you too much. Just go ahead and always put yourself in the context that you exist in. When we look at literacy, there are a lot of ways you can explain literacy to people. And the most basic conception of literacy is this idea of reading and writing traditional print text. But that has meant a lot of different things over time. If you look back 200, 300 years, you were considered fairly literate if you were capable of signing your own name. Obviously, that's not the standard we're trying to reach anymore. If we go a little more recently into the 50s and 60s, and before that, we were looking at, can you decode text in front of you? Can you look at something that's written in your native language and sound out the words and be able to take what was a sort of hardened form of speech, right? So that's what writing is, right? We take our thoughts and we put them down, and instead of speaking them out loud, we're using the spoken language that we have and we've translated it into a written one, and so we can capture our thinking. So then as a reader, can you basically undo that process? Can you come back from that and say, okay, here is what the writer was saying in our language? And that's certainly an important aspect and something that you as teachers are going to need to support students with. But now we look at literacy as a much more complex process. It has a much broader look. To be literate for the purposes of this class is to have the knowledge or competence in creating or communicating ideas. Now, if that sounds more simple, it's not, because that can look very different in a lot of different formats. Speaking, listening, reading, writing, those are the primary methods we use to express that we are literate. And that today could look like writing a traditional 5-paragraph essay, but it could also look like preparing a TikTok and performing it correctly and disseminating it correctly. It could look like creating an interactive website. It could look like creating a video, a vlog. There's so many different things. Creating music, creating mathematical equations, all of those things are literacy because you are communicating ideas through language. There's a lot of factors that will come into play as you try to then teach that. And one of the things that we know can be really impactful are the backgrounds of students. Curriculum requirements that you're going to have to adhere to in the classroom or already have to adhere to. Outside social issues, which could include this pandemic and how that affects your learning. And you as the teacher are going to have an impact on how literacy is learned in your classroom. One of the only things in this list that you can control to any extent is you. And that's why we're going to start off in Module 1 and in this course basics, looking at you, looking at how you view literacy and learning, and then what your history is as a learner so that you can reflect on, okay, what do I bring into the classroom? What do I bring to this learning experience that could affect how the learners that are sitting in front of me experience that use of language? Each module is going to have 3 types of assignments, more or less. Sometimes they'll only have 2, but these are the 3 big arching overtypes of what you're going to see and what I'm going to ask you to be doing. The first one is a discussion board. So if you go into discussion boards, you're going to be able to find the rubrics. They're not as obvious as they are with the projects because you have to go up, and let me get this handy dandy pen working. You have to go up to these 3 dots right here, and you'll be able to click on Show Rubric. When you do that, the rubric details will pop up so that you can see what's expected from you in the discussion. The discussions will also always have prompts and questions that I'm asking for you to respond to in your initial post. What do I mean by initial post? Each discussion board has 2 expectations and 2 due dates. Each one will first list the date your initial post is due. That's when you're just responding to the prompt. You are reading through all the material and seeing, okay, how does what I've learned so far from the course readings and my own background experience, how can I answer these questions? And then the second part is a due date for the responses that you have to give to your classmates. And this is really important because our goal is to create an asynchronous, which means not at the same time, like not in real time, conversation. So you can't have a conversation where you wait until the last 30 minutes of the conversation and then say everything you want to say. Nobody gets a chance to respond to you. Nobody has any opportunity to integrate your thinking into what they say. And if everybody did that, there would be nothing to respond to. That's why we require you to respond across days and across time. So don't make a plan for yourself where you post your initial response and then don't come back to the discussion board until 5 days later. You will not be successful, and it's part of, when you look in those rubrics, you'll see that part of the requirement is that you respond across days and across time. So plan on having your initial response in, and then maybe taking a look if you happen to have other people's initial responses that you can see, which, by the way, if you're unfamiliar with Canvas and how the discussion boards work, you won't be able to see other people's responses until you post for the first time. So if you look and it seems like nobody's done anything, that's probably not true yet, unless you happen to be that lucky number 1 person. But once you respond, you'll be able to see everybody's, be able to read through them, and you could respond right then. And then plan on coming back at least twice to respond to everyone else. Our very first discussion is a little bit different. It's just introductions, and it's a much shorter time frame. In the course basics, you're going to be asked in the module 1, you're going to be asked to introduce yourself to each other, and that has, I believe, like a 3-day window for responses. So obviously you'll have less time. So if you come back once and then at the very end, that would be understandable. But just make sure that you are thinking through those parts. And yeah, the rubric, which I already mentioned. If you want to see additional details on any of the expectations that I have for any assignment, check if there's a rubric. For the discussion boards, you have to go through the 3 dots and then show the rubric. For the projects, the rubric should appear right below, and if not, let me know and I'll make sure I get that. Okay, and the second type of assignment you're going to see are quizzes. These are really self-explanatory. In the name of the quiz, it's going to say which readings you need to do, and it's going to have the due dates for the quiz itself. They range from around 6 to 10 questions, and they're mostly multiple choice. I wouldn't expect them to be challenging as long as you have thoroughly read the readings before you start. That's another point to make. You should really be reading everything before you start working on the assignments. However, don't wait until after you've finished the reading to look at what the assignments are. I would suggest reading, at least skimming through the expectations for any assignments that you have, either discussion boards or the projects, so you have an idea of what's expected from you from the week. What my concern is if there's reading, and some of our readings might feel a little on the long side. We definitely have a few 30-page readings that you're going to be expected to work through. And if you wait until, say, Wednesday or Thursday after those readings before you even look to see what your assignments are, you might be put in a situation where the project takes a lot longer than you expect. And then you're put into a situation where it's very difficult for you to do high quality work in the time you have remaining. So just consider that as you're going through everything. Read before you get started. Read through everything before you get started, and then make sure you read all of the chapters and articles before you try and do any of the work, any of the discussion boards, quizzes, projects, with the exception of you can obviously do your introductory discussion board without having done a lot of extensive reading, because you're mostly telling me and everyone else in the class about yourself. The final type of assignment you'll see will be projects. These vary from module to module based on what the subject of the module is, but my generic advice is carefully read those instructions. Get together whatever resources you need to draw on for that sort of project, and then after you've completed a first full version, or at least gotten really far into it, go back to those instructions and the rubric again. Do you have all the elements? Did you address everything? Make sure that you're referencing course materials using APA style, which I'll get into a little bit more. We have a lot of resources for that we can direct you towards. We've linked to some of them in the course itself. In these course basic links, you're going to find some stuff on APA. Just be prepared to do that. It's sort of something we expect in the educational field, and so certainly something I want you to become more familiar with doing. APA citation is a style you see in a lot of social sciences, and it is the gold standard for education. You'll see a few little pockets of places that use other citation styles. For the most part, it's APA. The reason I care, it's part of our discipline, our field, how we communicate, the way we use language. And one of the things that matters to us as a community is accurately crediting those ideas that we've drawn on. So it's okay and totally expected and acceptable to be building your understanding based on the understandings of others. What's not acceptable is to de facto present those as your understanding. If you write something where you're being very heavily influenced or drawing on the ideas of, say, Fisher and Frey, who wrote our primary text, but you don't mention them and you don't cite them, it makes it seem as if you're claiming those ideas as your own. That's how our field views that. So always make sure that you are citing work. Citing is relatively simple. For example, if it's just a single author, all you need to do is have the author, this is how it works, parentheses, author, comma, the date. And by date, I don't mean the full date, it'll be the year. So 2012, 2020, whatever that might be. If there's two authors, again, relatively simple. Author's last name and author's last name, date. So for our primary text, this should be Fisher and Frey, comma, 2020, because you should be using the 5th edition. If you're not using the 5th edition, be warned, you're not going to have the right set of information for everything. Quizzes might trip you up. There might be some mismatches because the text, although not substantially and wildly different, is different enough in places that it can cause you trouble. So make sure you're ready for that. Now, direct quoting. So this is if citation is if your ideas are influenced by that. So a citation is, I read this and then I put it in my own words, but the idea came from someone else. That's for a citation. If you are directly quoting the text, which is not the preferred way to handle material in the educational field, there is an expectation that you're able to see what's been said and then rephrase it and put it into your own words, being a way to say, see, I understood this and I've integrated it, rather than just regurgitating it. However, there are times when there's just no way to say something better than the original author said it, or you can't figure out a way, or you think there's a purpose to using the exact words, like if you're trying to reference the way they said something to explain it. That's going to happen. In that case, you need to add another element to your citation, so you'll have the author, or author and author, as we might have with our main text, that date being the year, and then P, period, and the page number that quote appears on. I would say don't rely heavily on quotes, but if you need to, that's how you go forward. And lastly, I want to ask you guys to be a little forgiving of yourselves if you struggled this summer in ways you don't typically struggle with your learning. If you took a course in the spring, I'm sure you recognized how much harder it was during all of the pandemic closure, and we have no way of knowing exactly how long that's going to last to its full extent like it is right now when I'm recording this. But we have to assume that it is going to be a part of our lives to some extent throughout the summer. And there's a lot of things that we think are unrelated. For example, if I am stuck in the house, what does that have to do with my academics? I should be doing better because I have more time to study. This is something I heard over the spring. Frustration with students' own inability to focus. Please don't be too hard on yourself. Regardless of our situation, you're going to be feeling a lot of things. You're going to have good days and bad days. Give yourself some grace period in how you're able to focus when you have the stresses that come along with being cut off from our social world. We're social creatures. There's going to be an impact when we're not allowed to congregate, when we're not allowed out of our homes on a regular basis, which is good for the safety and healthy of everyone around us. So it's good that we're doing it. And I expect for us to some extent to be doing it for a while going forward until we have other ways to protect everyone around us. I expect we're going to do this to some extent. While we do that, things like learning can be a little harder. There's something called the stress response. When we're in a stressful situation, our body produces chemicals, including cortisol. They really can change the way that our brains function temporarily. So it can be harder to do things like access our working memory, to create functional plans, to have an idea of what we're going to do throughout the day, to think forward like that. All of that becomes a little more difficult. We're not in high levels of stress. We're not chased by a bear kind of stress. But we're sort of at this low, continuous level of stress under this situation, and that's going to affect us as learners. Don't be too hard on yourself for that. Listen to yourself, recognize what you've got going on, and plan for it, prepare for it. Set yourself up for success. This is a short course as far as time goes, so you really need to be engaging with the ideas regularly. If not 5 days a week, probably at least 3 or 4. That doesn't mean you spend 8 hours one day doing it. You don't have to do that. But pace yourself. Let yourself know in advance what you need to do each week. Plan out what has to happen. Give yourself time and space to accomplish it. And that's really all I have to say for this very first couple of days of the course. Hopefully everyone's successful. If you have questions, if you have concerns or comments, obviously contact me and I will try and do my best to assist you. If your questions are technological in nature, for example, I'm having trouble downloading a file, or that's not me. That's probably not my forte. In that case, contact the help desk. But if you have questions about the material, questions about my expectations, definitely contact me right away. And I look forward to hearing from everybody.